So, ich hoffe, Sie können die Präsentation jetzt sehen. Ich frage kurz meine Mitreferenten, die Sprecher, ob sie auch sehen können. Ja,
Ja,
super. Gut, dann starten wir los. Hallo und schönen Vormittag aus Algier. Mein Name ist Lisa Kronreif und ich bin die österreichische Wirtschaftsdelegierte am Außenwirtschaftscenter Algier und bin gemeinsam mit meinem Team hier zuständig für die Märkte Algerien, Tunesien und Niger. Ich begrüße Sie recht herzlich zu unserem Webinar und ich freue mich, dass Sie heute dabei sind. Da unsere Sprecher vorwiegend englischsprachig sind, werde ich, wie jetzt auch bereits im Vorfeld kommuniziert und bei der Bewerbung dieses Webinars angekündigt, die Sprache wechseln. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Before we dive into the details of the webinar, I would like to inform you about a few technical details. For your information, we will be recording this webinar and we will also upload it to YouTube afterwards, so you can watch it again and forward it to colleagues who maybe cannot be with us today. We will also send you the PowerPoint presentation after the webinar, so you can take a closer look at anything you might have missed in detail. And we also encourage you, of course, to ask questions in the chat section of the call. So during the webinar, we will collect these questions, and then at the end, we will try to answer as many of them as possible in our Q&A session. So what can you expect today in this webinar? As mentioned, we plan to take not longer than 1 hour for the webinar, and the webinar will be fully in English. Our legal experts we have invited, they will cover basically two main sections. The first part will be about Algeria, and the second part will be about Tunisia. For both countries, we will talk about what to consider when working in these markets. We will cover topics such as import regulations, legal aspects, customs, payments, and maybe also some risks that could be involved with that. In general, we want you to afterwards, after this webinar, get a good overview of what to consider in these markets. And so, yes, before I hand over to our speakers, I will just give you a brief overview of the current economic situation in Algeria and Tunisia and the relations with these countries. Don't worry, I will not go into detail of all of these points that are mentioned here on the slide. But I think the key takeaways from this slide is that Algeria is not only an important energy player in Africa, but also a key partner for Austria, because it is Austria's fourth largest trading partner in all of Africa. And yeah, while the country is still heavily dependent and reliant on oil and gas, it is pushing forward for its diversification of its industry, of its energy mix, and also it is ambitious regarding renewable energy and also some hydrogen projects that are in the pipeline. This transition obviously opens up a strong and growing opportunity for Austrian companies across all sectors. Moving on to Tunisia and the relations that Austria has with Tunisia, we see that it is a very diversified and export-oriented economy, which is closely integrated with Europe, and it's an important partner also for Austria in Africa. It's actually ranking as the 7th most important trading partner for Austria in all of Africa. With a strong industrial base and a skilled workforce and also growing sectors like tourism and renewables, Tunisia obviously offers a competitive environment for cooperation. So for Austrian companies, this means business opportunities in areas such as renewable energy, infrastructure, water management, manufacturing, and so on. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, our first two speakers of today, who will cover the section of Algeria, Mr. Jochen Hund. Maybe Jochen, you can also already join us in the webinar with your video. Jochen is a legal and business consultant and founding partner of Hund and Partners. He has more than 20 years of experience in the Middle East, so he definitely knows what he's doing. His work focuses on corporate and investment law, mergers and acquisitions, but also government contracts and also dispute resolution. So he advises international companies entering the region. And yes, his firm combines legal, tax, management consulting across borders and projects. So welcome, Jochen, and thanks for joining us today. And also, you can start your presentation. The digital or the virtual floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And of course, I have with me our cooperation partner since 2016, Adnan Boucher, in Algiers. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been an honor to be with you today and to deliver this presentation. Am I on the video? Can you see me? Because you just said I should join. I think I'm visible, right, on the video? But it's just you can see me, yeah?
I cannot because I'm doing the presentation, but I think you should be visible to everybody else.
I'm here. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, good. All right. So let's start. Just dive into it immediately. So this presentation, we're going to try to give you a very realistic and specific and operational vision of this market, which is obviously very interesting, Algerian market, and getting more and more interesting precisely because of the focus on energy, which is sort of the topic of the decade, isn't it? So here, speaking about Algeria, usually one hears two very much opposing views. One, it's very promising, especially now because of the energy question, but also some other subjects we're going to talk about. And on the other hand, it's usually has the reputation of being a very complicated market. So the reality is usually somewhere in the middle. So we can describe the Algerian market as not a closed market, but also not completely liberalized. And this we will see it then more in detail. In details, we can also say that is a heavily regulated market. And therefore, well, even though huge opportunities exist, especially for European companies, and especially in Central Europe, in Austria, it needs the actors, the business need to be very well prepared and very structured in their approach, because otherwise there's, of course, a lot of risks to falling in one of the pitfalls, which the Algerian market features because of its complications and also the still existing bureaucracy. So we will look now into four subjects. First, the market itself, and then the very important subject of import regulations. Then we look into how to draft and structure your contracts. And then we will also look in the extremely important matter in Algeria, which is money flows and banking practices. All right, let's start with market itself. As we've seen, it's the biggest market in the Maghreb region, of course, 45 million. This is, of course, has a huge domestic demand. And on the other hand, of course, it is a very oil and gas dominated market still. And this has the effect, of course, that the Algerian state plays a very important role in the economy. What does the state do? It's intervening in many ways, in regulations, also in investing proactively itself, and also in strategic governance. So the state is sort of omnipresent. And this is one of the important features of Algeria itself, as compared with many other economies in the region. Next slide, please. So what we're having today is, can we have the next slide, please? Is that the strategy of the state is mostly evolving around three different subjects, which is the imports should be substituted, so there's industrialization policy. And also digitalization, especially in the field of customs, has also an important role given by the state. And this has it has an effect that it's a hybrid situation. Basically, it's partially modernized, partially digitalized. It's an emerging market in many senses. Obviously, the import substitution policy is important for European exporters into Algeria. And we can see that the state comes with regulations in which it prohibits certain and restricts certain products from being imported, and it encourages local production. And also, of course, industrial investments are favored over other investments. So we have especially countries like Austria who have a lot of machine production and machinery production are actually most welcome in the Algerian market. But at the same time, we have this hybrid situation. It's only still partially modernized, and it's sort of hybrid, which means between the traditional bureaucracy and administrative practice and this modernization, digitalization, you have basically a sort of a very big complexity, which needs also the right advisors on the ground, of course. The next slide, please. This can be seen most importantly in the field of imports. This is a very famous subject because we had these new regulations in 2025 on import control and new, I want to say, stakeholders intervening and so on. So we have basically here a situation in which the traditional authority, Algex, has been replaced by a multi-stakeholder system in which it's not only the state authorities that intervene, but also the banks and the customs. Next slide, please. And this is, of course, one of the most important challenges that exporters to Algeria face. We can see here the stakeholders, it's the Ministry of Trade, and it's the custom authority on the state side, and then you have the banks who have the most important role, actually. Why? Because of the need for domiciliation, to have a CADEX account, and also the need of checking the compliance, documentary compliance, and also the banks, they have actually the authority to green light or to refuse financial transfers. They themselves decide based on the compliance check that they do whether a transfer can take place or not, and that's of course extremely important in this kind of validation process. The customs authority, of course, they do the usual vetting of documents, but also technical compliance standards and also physical inspections. And as you've seen, the customs authorities have been partially digitalized now, which of course makes it faster, but at the same time, the system is not that fast because of this complexity of various stakeholders. So we see it's a complex validation process, and one needs to be prepared in terms of product compliance, of bank validations, and a good correspondence with the bank and in dialogue with the bank, and also documentary compliance, and also doing the customs compliance need to all be ticked in order to get through this process, which is key to do business in Algeria. Next slide, please. So this leads to obviously specific difficulties that can be encountered in practice, not only delays, but also regulatory changes. Maybe we could, regarding the specifics of this system, we could maybe have a deep dive a deep dive webinar sometime in the future to see exactly what is required in order to navigate through these import processes, which needs also a lot of, I want to say, documents anticipating into the future. It can be very challenging in terms of spare parts and so on. So anyhow, we're having not only delays, possible delays, but also regulatory changes because they are not being legislated by the legislator, but they're down to the Ministry of Commerce actually, which is in charge now, not Algex. And therefore, we have also not only high documentary requirements, but also a lack of visibility sometime because it's of overlapping of authorities, of competencies, and therefore it's actually very complex. One needs to be very well prepared. Next slide, please. So, but at the same time, while navigating through this, I want to say, through these loopholes and through these challenges, well, loopholes, there are some loopholes. We're going to talk about this sometime later. But anyhow, we then can, of course, reap the fruits of the various opportunities which exist in the Algerian market, and also which is the industrialization policy for machine producers, for example, but also in the agro and food industry. We have, of course, packaging and other processing needs. And in energy is not only oil and gas, but also solar and green hydrogen, obviously, and also in green tech itself in terms of water management, waste management, and generally energy efficiency. Next slide, please. Because now we're going to look into contracts in Algeria, which is very essential to secure your rights. The most important thing, basically, when doing business is to have a good contract, contract with the local knowledge, and considering all these complexities of the system. The main risk of basically of a contract not being suboptimal is, of course, non-payment, but also some other administrative traps and deadlocks, meaning regulatory risks, and also on the banking side, of course, the impossibility or delays in making transfers. Yeah, so therefore, arbitration and contractual guarantees are always very, very important to cater for when drafting your contract for doing business with Algeria. What happens a lot, basically, that goods are being delivered, and then because of a bad contract, payment is either being delayed or becoming even impossible, and there's no quick remedy or recourse. Therefore, arbitration is an important advice to use arbitration clauses. And to secure your rights, especially to secure payments, it's very important not only to have high advance payment, but also to use LCs, letter of credits, to define specifically the currency, and also, again, using arbitration clauses. Second, after the contract, next slide, please. It's very, very important to choose the right local partner who you usually need in Algeria. And here you obviously, you need to vet this partner very, very carefully. And then you need to supervise this partner, and then you need to secure your rights. So again, you're coming back to having a good contract, basically having a good choice. And Advantage Austria, of course, are best in position to help you in this matchmaking of choosing the right partner for your business in Algeria. And then afterwards comes a good contract. Now, the customs is another challenge, as you've seen. Next slide, please. Yeah, where we have a full documentary compliance challenges in terms of technical documents, certificate of origin, commercial invoice, and you have to especially check that the invoice must match exactly with the contract, with the sales contract, and so on. So the compliance is very, very strict. So one needs to do one's homework very, very well in order to avoid delays or even a non-payment. Now we come to the most important point, which is the financial matters. Next slide, please. At the very heart of the Algerian system, where, as we know very well, the currency is not freely convertible. So we have these very strict exchange regulations in which every transfer is being controlled, and no amount of money leaves the country without proper bank validation. So the banks are in the driver's seat. There are also the domiciliators. So we have a domiciliated account, a SEDAC account, with a local bank, and therefore the bank with these SEDAC accounts, it verifies not only the contract, but also the compliance with each other and the consistency of the whole documents provided. Without that, and there's usually no way of cutting any corners or whatever, and just the bank, they just block the transaction in case the compliance is not 100%. Next slide, please. So we see here the SEDAC accounts, they domiciliate, but they convert from one currency to another, and as an exception to the normal non-convertibility, and they carry out the transfers, but the bank is basically in the driver's seat to let transfers through or not if the compliance is not complete. Next slide, please. In practice, we have, of course, very real risks of payments that can be blocked or be delayed or even completely being refused, or of of the bank requiring additional documentation, or because of some mismatch, or because of maybe some regulations have changed in the meantime. Yeah, so that's a huge field of compliance, and it's very important to navigate through this successfully, because it happens very often actually that these blockages take place, for example, because of some discrepancy between invoice and contract, as we mentioned, or some products might be deemed sensitive in nature. That could be another reason, or the documentation is being deemed insufficient, or with some issues with the domiciliation. All of these are possible reasons for transfers being delayed, especially the worst case scenarios, of course, if goods have already been delivered and then the payment is being not only delayed, but maybe even completely refused. And then you have a real problem. And then you would have, of course, if you haven't put an arbitration clause, you are maybe up for a very lengthy and difficult proceeding. So again, using arbitration clauses is very, very important. Next slide, please. On the solutions, of course, as you said, is secure payments not only through high advance payments, which can be much higher than in Europe, also using letters of credit, and also export credit insurance. Lisa, maybe you could say a few words about that at the end to what the Austrian export credit insurance institution could offer in that field, or we could also maybe have another deep dive webinar later on. Next slide, when we're coming to the conclusion. If we look at it as a whole, the Algerian market from a business and legal perspective is, of course, demanding and very regulated, but at the same time, of course, very promising and can be navigated very successfully if one does one's homework as required, through the necessary anticipation, a very structured approach, and securing one's payment and having the local expertise on one side to navigate through the process and understand the local specifics. So therefore, as a final message, we can say Algeria's market is not at all for improvising and for an artist's approach. I would say this, we leave it for the Vienna Opera. but it's rather a market which demands good preparation, good homework being done, and a very high degree of structuring. And that's it from my side, and wish you all the best, of course. Questions, we can look into them afterwards. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this very insightful presentation. I know covering a big and complex market like Algeria in just 25, 30 minutes is certainly challenging, but I think you managed to provide a very clear and useful overview on the key topics that are essential when operating in Algeria, as you know, import regulations, legal aspects, payments, and so on, and also the risks involved, which obviously need to be talked about. Here again, you see the contact details, but we will share anyway the presentation afterwards. But also, as you mentioned, questions. If you have any questions, please post them also in the chat. We will, at the end of the webinar, have a Q&A session where we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Now we would like to move on to the Tunisian part of this presentation, and I am introducing to you Mr. Lazar Sahbani from CLS Strategy. Welcome. Mr. Sahbani is a strategy and business consultant with experience in advising companies on market strategies and corporate and legal matters in North Africa. His work focuses on supporting international clients and navigating the regulatory and operational environment in North Africa. He's also joined by his colleague, Sultan Jebenyani. And so welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. You will give us insights onto the Tunisian market and what to consider when doing business there. So thank you very much, and the virtual stage is yours. And again, to our audience, members of the webinar, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. Yes, Mr. Sahbani, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Lazar, as introduced by Lisa, and together with Sultan Jebenyani, we will walk you through a practical guide for Austrian companies entering Tunisian market. Our goal today is not just to describe Tunisia in general, but also to give you a clear business-oriented view of the market and where the opportunities are, where the friction are, and how to enter into the right legal and commercial structure. We will cover basically 6 points, as mentioned in the presentation. So the presentation is a bit full. We will share it with you. We have different details and a lot of details, but I will try to summarize. So yeah, we will cover 6 points basically. Why Tunisia first? Second, market entry options, the legal and contracts framework, the role of local partners, customs and registration processes, and finally, payments and risk mitigations. So let's start first with the first point, which is why Tunisia. If you can change the slide, please, to the next slide. Thank you. So why Tunisia? Tunisia is a market of around 12 million people. Actually, it's much less than Algeria for sure. It's much smaller, with a GDP of $48 billion, and I mean significant percentage of growth. It's around 4.2% in 2025. And it's also deeply connected to Europe, you know, which is mainly for importation, which makes this market familiar and accessible environment for Austrian companies. But the real attraction, I would say, for Tunisia is its geographic position. Actually, on the map, when you look, It's across roads between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So for Austrian exporters and investors, this gives Tunisia value not only on domestic market, but also as a player as a regional platform. So there are various structural advantages. The first one I would say is the legal framework itself, which is relatively familiar to European investors. So we have different laws like the 2016 investment law, which strengthened investors' protections. Also, Tunisia has an industrial infrastructure with more than 150 industrial zones and 2 free trade zones, which are in Bizerte, my native place actually, and Zarzis. And fourth, the fact that the European investors already account the majority of our FDI, actually the foreign direct investment in Tunisia, the majority is coming from Europe, which reduces the senses of legal operational formalities. Knowledge is better, for Tunisia. So that said, I can consider that Tunisia is attractive market. It's dynamic market, but there are still some main challenges which you have to consider. The first one I would say is the dinar itself, which is not freely convertible. So there is a strong foreign exchange regulation in Tunisia. The second restriction I would say is linked to the importation restrictions, which have been tightened, especially this last months and years. And also there is still bureaucratic timing, which is slowing down the investment, which is slower than Europe, I would say. And lastly, the tariffs are very, very high as well. Thank you. Very high as well compared to other markets. So go on to the next slide, maybe. I believe that we covered that slide fully. Sorry, I have just 15 minutes, so I have to rush a bit. When we speak about market entry, the first question which comes in our mind is choosing for sure the right structure. There are various structures offered in Tunisia. So for many companies, Austrian companies, the simplest way, I would say, to enter into the Tunisian market is through a distribution agreement simply, or through a distributor or an agent acting directly on the market. This is actually the lowest risk option for sure, because it avoids you setting a local entity and allows you to test the market first. The commercial agent is often the preferred first step because it gives you, commercial reach to the market, and in many cases, the agent handles customs clearance and all the formalities on your behalf. So there is nothing to do, I would say, from your side except exporting from your country. And if you want stronger presence, the next level, I would say, is the branch office, which is possible in Tunisia, but you need to remember that the parent company remains fully liable in case of a branch. The other structure is subsidiary, which is a legal entity, to set up a legal entity in Tunisia, which gives you, a stable framework, and it's, I would say, medium-term option. But the setup timeline could take time. Here we said between 5 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks, sorry, but in practice it could be even more. Also, we have free zones entities which are interesting for export-oriented activities because there are a lot of exemption and a lot of facilities. They offer customs and tariff, and tax advantages, but the disadvantage, I would say, or the trade-off of this option is that the domestic sales are restricted. So you can only do exports, but you cannot do, local, sales on the local market. Finally, the joint ventures, which become relevant when the activity requires it. And particularly when you do retail trade or commercial activities or strategic activities in Tunisia, you are required to have partnership with Tunisian nationals, and in this case you have to set up a JV. So this is basically the different forms. These are, basically the different forms. We can move to the next slide, maybe, please. Thank you. For import regulations and legal framework, I would say that the question would be, what does the regulation or the regulatory environment look like when you actually want to sell into Tunisia? So the first point is that Tunisia formally follows a liberalized import regime for general commercial goods. So the principle is freedom. You can import whatever you want, except some goods which are restricted and which require import licenses, especially in agriculture and certain industrial sectors. Tariffs are seriously a commercial issue because they are high. The average is around 19%, as you can see in the presentation. On top of that, some some consumer goods competing with local production have faced additional surcharges since 2022. Because of the crisis in Tunisia, they increased drastically customs tariffs on some goods, which could reach 200%. So before signing contracts, I would advise you to verify not only customs classifications, but also whether your product falls into a politically sensitive or protected segment. I would say a second operational point is prior domiciliation with the bank. This is extremely important in Tunisia. So you require bank domiciliation before importing goods and services. In other words, shipments and payment processing are closely tied to banking compliance, and you cannot avoid this. So I believe that I covered this slide. Maybe we can move to the next one, please. Thank you. For the contract structuring, so contracts is not a minor detail actually in Tunisia. It's a central question for sure. The reason is very simple. Many of the commercial risks in Tunisia do not come from bad faith, but from administrative and regulatory friction, I would say. So your contracts should anticipate those frictions. So in practice, that means that your contracts should be very well drafted and should be very clear on focal points like payment currency, documentary obligations, import responsibilities, allocation of customs risk, and how to resolve disputes in case of any disputes. So the key takeaway here maybe is that you have to look deeply to draft the contract well and to look deeply into the details. And maybe you have to provide for a governing law which is familiar, such as Austrian law. And for arbitration, we advise to go with the with the ICC or with the VIAC arbitration. Now on local partners, it's not always required, as I said before. So for manufacturing, industrial activities, export-oriented activities, there is no requirement to have a local partner. It's optional. But in the other sectors like retail and trading sector, it's mandatory, and also in some strategic sectors. So my message maybe for you here, I mean, choosing a local partner could be a must in some cases, but could be a plus in other cases. It could be even recommended because they know the local market, and they could help you entering the market. But for sure, you have to choose well, because having a bad partner is not advisable. We can go maybe to the next slide, please, about customs. Yeah, thank you. Maybe Sultan, if you can say a few words about this slide. I don't know if you are ready for it, or I can follow if you wish. Okay, I will follow for it. So there is new payment term under the Central Bank of Tunisia circular dated 2025-13. I mean, this framework actually, I mean, provide for 3 layers, I would say. So for short-term payments between 0 to 3 months, it's a bit flexible and no guarantee required. Any payment method is allowed, subject for sure to the commercial bank approval. For medium term, it's more formal, more restricted. So guarantee is mandatory. Only specific instruments are accepted. A guarantee from a non-resident bank is and a revolvable documentary credit is mandatory. Also, bill of exchange backed by a non-resident bank is also required, and so on and so forth. And for long term, more than a year, it requires prior approval from the Central Bank of Tunisia, which may impose some guarantees, some reporting obligations, and some repayment terms. Go into the next slide. Next, please. Okay. So for customs registration and documentation, to be practical, I mean, for this topic, I mean, for imports, Tunisia is paperwork sensitive, so there is a lot of documentation to be gathered. You can see on the slide, I mean, the different documents required. I will not list them here, but it's. I believe we will have the slides, so we can go into the details. And for the company registration setup, you can see that there are 8 points actually. The first one is to reserve the name with RNE, etc., etc. I will not detail this. Lisa, you can go ahead with the next slide, because for the interest of time, we are a bit late. For the payment and risk management, the focus here is about foreign exchange regulation framework. As I said earlier, it's a bit restrictive in Tunisia, maybe less heavy than Algeria, but a bit restrictive. There is a process, and we here in the slide, we provided for some instruments, and we classified them by the most favorable, I would say, which is we start with the confirmed irrecoverable letter of credit, advance payment, documentary collection, etc., etc. And there are some risk mitigation toolkit here, which we provide also. So the major one would be to go with Austrian ECA to cover for political commercial risk, and which is strongly recommended. Also, you have to maybe to prepare private credit insurance for short-term credit coverage. Yeah, so you'll have the slides and you will go into the details of this risk mitigation instruments. Next, please, because we just have maybe 4 minutes left. Yeah, the key takeaways here, I would say that to summarize, Tunisia is an open market for Austrian business. The legal framework is pretty clear. The investment law of 2016 protects investors. There is a bilateral investment treaty in force, which gives, protection to Austrian investors. 100% foreign ownership is possible in most of the sectors, aside from retail activities and strategic activities. The import controls have been tightened since 2025. I would say here we are saying 2026, but even earlier it has been tightened. Forex is definitely a critical risk in Tunisia. You have to manage it actively. Legal and contractual hygiene is non-negotiable in Tunisia, and you have to draft correct contracts in Tunisia to avoid any legal risks. And the fourth point I would say is local partnership. The advice here is to choose carefully your local partner to do good business in Tunisia. So thank you for your attention. I believe that I'm still on time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for this presentation. A great overview of the Tunisian market. I know it's very difficult to speak about such big markets like Algeria and Tunisia in such a short time, but I think you did a great job to outline the most important topics and going into detail, obviously, then further in a separate discussion. Regarding the Tunisian market, I would also just like to mention that even though we have our office in Algiers, we also have a colleague in Tunis who is supporting Austrian companies on the ground for the Tunisian market. So if you need anything regarding Tunisia from our side, please contact us and we'll be happy to establish contact with our person in Tunisia on the ground who can help you there. Maybe we're moving on to our Q&A session. And I would like to ask all the speakers to join me also via video and audio, because we're moving on to the questions that we have received during your presentations. And one of the questions that we've received concerns Algeria, the domiciliation of documents. Maybe Adnan or Jochen, could you briefly clarify what is meant by the domiciliation of documents and what is required in practice?
Okay, I will try to answer this question. You are hearing me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, but first I would like to apologize for my somewhat imperfect or actually chaotic English. So please feel free to stop me if you need me to repeat or to clarify something. Well, the domiciliation of import documents refers to a mandatory banking procedure in Algeria, whereby the importer must register the import transaction with the bank before any shipment or payment is made. In practical terms, the bank will require a complete set of documents, typically including the pro forma invoice or the commercial invoice, the contract, if any, and the importer's corporate documents. Most important, the bank will verify that the import operation is fully compliant with the Algerian regulations. This means that if the goods are subject to any prior authorization, license or regulatory approval, for example, from the Ministry of Commerce and another competent authority, such approval must be obtained before the bank can proceed with the domiciliation. Without it, the bank will simply refuse to register the transaction. Once the domiciliation is completed, it allows the importer to legally proceed with the importation, arrange payments abroad, transfer or letter of credit, any clear the goods through customs upon arrival. In short, domiciliation is not just an administrative formality. It is a key regulatory control step, ensuring that the import complies with foreign exchange and trade regulation.
Thank you for clarifying this. And I think it also answers part of the question, because we received when discussing banks in Algeria, are you referring to internal local banks? And yes, you've just answered this question regarding the domiciliation. We're talking about internal local banks in Algeria. Maybe to move to Tunisia, there's a question about market entry and payments. So from a market entry perspective in Tunisia, what are the risks and benefits of working with an exclusive agent or distributor? That's part of the first part of the question. And is it difficult for importers in Tunisia to make payments in hard currency euro to Europe? Maybe Lazar can answer to this. So two parts of the question. One, what are the risks and benefits working with an exclusive agent or distributor in Tunis or in Tunisia? And second part, is it difficult for importers in Tunisia to make payments in hard currency to Europe?
Yeah, is it the advantages and disadvantages of entering with exclusive agent in Tunisia? I would say it's good because it avoids you complication to set up a new business, etc. Because it's easy. Now it will if you have the exclusivity of an agent, you will be dependent of that agent, which is not recommended, my advice would be maybe to diversify and to open to other agents. And also a recommendation is to choose the agent correctly, because your reputation could be in cause here, So and the second part of the question, to answer it, I believe that I answered during the presentation. It is feasible to transfer money from Tunisia. The legal framework is there. It's regulated. There is a process. There is like in Algeria, there is a domiciliation process. But it's feasible, and in most of the cases it's flexible, except for restricted products, which could be forbidden in some cases, or a bit complicated.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking a bit at the clock, but I think we have time for one more question regarding Algeria. About transport question, Incoterm actually a question, insurance requirement for Algeria, CIF. Is transport insurance in Algeria currently required locally under the Incoterm CIF? What is the current regulation and what changes are expected with the new insurance law planned for 2027? maybe Adnan can also.
Yes, sure. Well, it's a
Thank
good
you.
question. I think we need another webinar for responding.
Which is a great idea, because I was going to say that would be the next question. Also, the kind of question I would ask to the audience to provide us with interesting topics to discuss for future webinars. Yes.
I saw all the questions, and every question I think need a webinar to respond properly. Well, under current Algerian regulation, there is no general strictly enforced obligation requiring all imported goods to be insured locally in Algeria. In practice, under Incoterm CIF, the seller arranges transport insurance typically with an international insurer, and this is generally accepted for a contractual and operational standpoint. However, Algerian law, notably the insurance framework under Ordinance 9507, already reflects a policy preference for local insurance placements. And in some cases or sectors, local insurance may be required or strongly recommended. In practice today, CIF with foreign insurance is still commonly used and accepted, but authorities and banks may increasingly scrutinize insurance documentation, especially for large projects or strategic imports. Accepted regulation change for 2027 planning. Let's see, there is a clear and ongoing reform of the Algerian insurance framework, and this is where the situation becomes critical. The upcoming insurance law reform is accepted to one, reintroduce or strengthen the principle of mandatory local insurance for goods and equipments imported by sea or by air, and to require that such insurance be placed with locally licensed Algerian insurers. This policy objective is clear: to retain insurance premiums with Algerian and strengthen the local insurance market. And let's say in parallel, market signal and informal regulatory practice already indicate a move towards mandatory local cargo insurance for imports, potentially becoming standard from 2026 onward, even if not yet fully codified or uniformly enforced. The practical impacts for CIF deliveries, if the reforms are enacted and enforced by 2027, which is highly likely, the implications are: first, the classical CIF structure with foreign insurance may not longer be sufficient or compliant. Importers may be required to replace foreign insurance with local insurance, or duplicate coverage, foreign plus local, which creates inefficiencies and costs issues. Bank or customs authority may also refuse documentation if local insurance is not in place. For my part, recommended approach, forward-looking, for transaction planned in 2027, I strongly recommended to not rely solely on CIF insurance placed abroad. Consider structuring transaction as CFR instead of CIF, plus local insurance arranged by an Algerian buyer, or CIF with parallel local insurance policy issued in Algeria. And also engage early with the local insurer and the importer's bank to validate the acceptable structure.
Thank you so much for answering this question, very detailed. I know that there were some more questions, but since we're running out of time, I will kindly ask you to wait a bit until we get back to you with an email to answer your other questions that you had. This concludes actually the content part of our webinar, and I would like to thank the speakers and also the participants of the webinar for being with us and for sharing questions and insights. And then last but not least, we have a few events coming up that I would like to share with you. So we have in May and June some exhibitions, the construction exhibition Batimatek, agriculture exhibition SIPSA. If you are coming to that, if you're interested, if you want to have more information, please contact us. Both these exhibitions will be in Algiers, and we cover these sectors. So if you want any details about this or contacts in these fields, please let us know. We then also plan in June to have the Algeria Rail Expo in Oran. So if you are going to be there, if you want information on that, please let us know. We'll be happy to support you with this. And then also on May 28th, I will be in Austria for our yearly flagship event, Exporttag, Exporters Day, and I will be happy to see as many of you that I now see virtually, maybe also offline in person in Vienna at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, and I'll be happy to talk to you about your business in Algeria, Tunisia, and Niger in Vienna. In case you cannot make it to Vienna on the 28th of May, I'll be traveling together with my colleagues from Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, Turkey, and Ukraine, all over Austria. You see the dates below. So we can meet in any of these cities that you see on the slide, and I'll be happy to talk to you and your business and how we can best support you there. Again, as I said, so I think this webinar shows there was a lot of interest. We received 100 registrations for this webinar, and we are happy to continue this series of webinars. So if you have any ideas for future topics, I think, as Adnan mentioned, I think we can discuss all the topics that were mentioned in the webinar in detail and make another webinar on each of these topics. But yeah, if you have any interesting topics you would like to hear more about, that you would like us to do a webinar on, please let us know. And again, just as a reminder, we recorded this webinar and it will be available on YouTube afterwards. We will send you the link. And also you will receive the PowerPoint presentation after the webinar. And again, if your question hasn't been answered so far, we will get back to you also via email to answer your question. If you need anything else, here you have our contact details. If you need, market research, if you need to find a local partner, if you want us to help you with any issue you're facing in these markets that we mentioned, please contact me and my team. We're very happy to support you. And thank you very much for participating today, and have a great day.